Imagine this. A black waitress standing in the middle of a lavish wedding is told to asterisk kneel and apologize for something she didn't do, all because of the color of her skin. And in that moment, with every eye on her, she says two words that change asterisk everything. I won't. In the next 75 minutes, I'm going to take you deep into a story that's going to make you question what you think you know about dignity, power, and the black experience. But first, let me ask you something. Have you ever been in a moment where you had to choose between bowing down or standing tall, knowing the world was watching? Hold that thought, because this story is about to hit you right where you live. My name is Mike, and for the past 35 years, I've been studying real black stories. The ones that don't make it to the headlines but live in our hearts, our homes, and our history. I've spent countless hours digging into narratives like this one, finding patterns that most people miss, connections that run deeper than what you see on the surface. Today's story is about a young black woman named Mary Johnson, a waitress working at a high society wedding in the heart of Charlotte, North Carolina. On the surface, it's a story about one humiliating moment at a fancy event. But let me tell you, it's really about something much deeper. It's about the weight of history on her shoulders, the fire of resilience in her soul, and the way one person's refusal to kneel can spark a movement that changes lives. By the end of this video, you're going to understand why this story matters to every single one of us. Now, let me be real with you for a second. Stories like this one, they don't just entertain us. They hold up a mirror to our past, our present, and our future. And when I first heard about Mary's story, it hit me like a ton of bricks. Not because it's dramatic, though trust me, it is, but because it's so familiar. If you've ever worked a service job, if you've ever felt the sting of being looked down on because of who you are, if you've ever had to swallow your pride to keep a paycheck, then you asterisk know what I'm talking about. This story is about Mary, but it's also about you, me, and every black person who's ever had to navigate a world that tries to keep us small. And by the time we're done, you're going to see how her stand is a blueprint for our own. But here's what nobody tells you about stories like this. They're not just about one moment. They're about centuries of moments stacked on top of each other. Moments where black folks, especially black women, have been asked to kneel, to shrink, to disappear. And yet we keep standing. That's what makes this story so powerful, and that's why I'm breaking it down for you today. So grab a seat, maybe some coffee, because we're going deep. And trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next. Here's what I'm going to show you in this video. First, we're going to walk through the surface story, what happened that day at the wedding, who Mary was, and why her choice shook the room. Second, we're going to dig into the historical context, how this moment echoes the struggles of black women in service roles going back generations. Third, we're going to uncover the hidden layers, the symbolism, the subtext, the things most people miss. Fourth, we're going to connect this story to our community today, how it reflects what we're still fighting for. And finally, we're going to hit the deeper truth, the revelation that ties it all together and shows us why this story isn't just about Mary, but about our future. But here's the stakes. If you don't understand these layers, you're missing the real message. For us to stay on the surface, to miss the power in our own stories. Not today. We're going all the way in. Now, before we dive into the story itself, let me set the stage a little. I've been analyzing stories like this for over 3 decades because I believe our narratives hold truths that can change how we see ourselves in the world. I grew up in a family where my grandmother was a domestic worker, my mother was a nurse's aide, and I worked as a server through college. I know what it's like to smile through disrespect, to keep your head down when you want to scream. So when I heard about Mary Johnson, I didn't just see a story, I saw my family, my community, my history. And I knew I had to break it down for you because this isn't just a feel-good tale. It's a wake-up call. But wait, there's something else you need to know before we start. this story isn't just about one black woman's courage. It's about what happens when that courage ripples outward, when it forces people to confront their own biases, their own silence. And by the time we're done, you're going to see how Mary's refusal to kneel wasn't just a personal victory. It was a spark that lit a fire. So let's get into it. Let's start why. The day everything changed. The day Mary stood tall at a wedding that was supposed to be perfect, but ended in pieces. Now picture this. It's a warm summer afternoon in Charlotte, North Carolina, at a place called the Rosewood Veranda. One of those fancy outdoor venues with white linen tables, crystal vases, and flowers that cost more than most people's rent. Mary Johnson, a 28-year-old black waitress, is working the event of the year, the wedding of Anna Bennett, a wealthy white socialite, to John Matthews, a rising star in the hospitality industry. Mary has been at this job for years, balancing trays, dodging rude guests, and keeping her smile tight no matter what. But today, something's different. Today, the air feels heavy, like a storm's about to break. And then it happens. A single crystal vase on the banquet table shifts just an inch. It doesn't fall, doesn't break, but it's enough to catch Anna's eye. And in front of every guest, politicians, CEOs, old money families, Anna turns on Mary with venom. "You're just a lowly waitress," she says, her voice cutting through the crowd. "Can't you do one asterisk thing right?" The words hang there, sharp and cruel. And then Anna's mother, Elizabeth Bennett, steps in, piling on with a comment that makes the room go silent. These people should know better than to touch what they can't afford. These people, you know exactly what she meant. And in that moment, every eye turns to Mary, waiting for her to shrink, to apologize, to kneel. But here's where it gets really interesting. Mary doesn't move, she doesn't cry, she doesn't shout. She just stands there, her hands steady, her gaze calm, and says, "I've apologized, I'll fix the vase, but I won't kneel." And that's when John Matthews, the groom, steps forward from the back of the crowd. His voice is low, but it carries. "What did you just say? And what happens next? It's going to blow your mind." But before we get there, let me tell you why this moment isn't just about a wedding. It's about a history of black women who have been told to bow and refused. Stay with me, because this is where the story starts to crack open. Now, I know some of you are already feeling this moment in your chest, that mix of anger, pride, and recognition. If you've ever been in Mary's shoes, drop a comment below and tell me, what's a time you had to stand tall when someone tried to make you feel small? I read every single comment and I want to know your story. Let's keep this conversation going as we dive deeper into what happened that day and why it matters so much. Ready? Let's go. All right, we're diving deeper now, and this is where it gets real. To understand why Mary Johnson's refusal to kneel at that wedding hit so hard, we need to go back, way back, to the historical roots of moments like this. Because what happened at the Rosewood Veranda wasn't just about one rude bride or one misplaced vase. It was a collision of centuries of black women in service roles being told to stay invisible, to swallow their dignity, to kneel. And to get why Mary's stand was so powerful, we've got to look at the weight she was carrying, a weight that stretches back to slavery, through Jim Crow, and right into today's service industry. So, let's break this down. First, let's talk about the history of black women in service work. During slavery, black women weren't just laborers in the fields. They were domestic workers in the big houses, cooking, cleaning, nursing white children, all while their own families were torn apart. They were expected to be loyal, silent, and grateful for scraps. Sound familiar? That expectation didn't vanish after emancipation. During Jim Crow, black women made up the backbone of domestic work: maids, cooks, laundresses, often working for white families who saw them as less than human. My own grandmother was a maid in the 1950s, and she told me stories of being called girl by women half her age, of being expected to smile through insults, of walking miles home because she couldn't sit at the front of the bus. And yet, she stood tall in her own way, just like Mary. But here's what nobody tells you about that history. Black women in these roles weren't just surviving, they were resisting. They organized in secret, shared resources, and passed down stories of defiance. In the 1930s, domestic workers in cities like Atlanta and New York formed unions, demanding better wages and respect. They didn't have social media to amplify their voices, but they had each other. And that legacy of quiet resistance, it's in Mary's DNA. When she refused to kneel, she wasn't just standing for herself. She was standing for every black woman who ever scrubbed a floor, served a meal, or smiled through pain to keep her family fed. Now, let's fast forward to the 21st century. Today, black women are still overrepresented in service jobs, waitresses, hotel maids, home health aides. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, black women make up about 17% of the service industry workforce, despite being only 7% of the population. And these jobs, they're low wage, high stress, and often come with a side of disrespect. I worked as a server in college, and I can't tell you how many times I was snapped at, ignored, or treated like I was invisible, all while being expected to keep that smile plastered on. That's the context Mary was working in. A world where black women are still seen as the help, where their dignity is too often the price of a paycheck. But wait, there's another layer here that's going to change how you see this story. The wedding where Mary worked wasn't just any event. It was a showcase of wealth and power, a stage for the Bennett family to flex their status. And historically, events like these, galas, balls, weddings, have always been places where black workers were expected to perform subservience. Think about the plantation balls where enslaved women served food while their own children went hungry. Or the 1960s country club dinners where black waitstaff were told to stay out of sight, unless needed. The Rosewood Veranda was a modern version of that stage, and Anna Bennett's outburst wasn't just personal. It was a performance of power rooted in that ugly history. And this is where it gets really interesting. Mary's story isn't unique, it's part of a pattern. Look at the civil rights movement. Rosa Parks wasn't the first black woman to resist segregation on a bus, but her refusal to give up her seat in 1955 became a spark because it was so clear, so undeniable. Same with Mary. Her moment at the wedding wasn't the first time a black woman stood up to disrespect in a service job, but it was a moment that couldn't be ignored. Why? Because it happened in front of an audience that included John Matthews, a man whose own history made him see Mary stand in a way others couldn't. And that's what we're diving into next. The surface story of what happened that day and why it turned a wedding into a reckoning. But before we move on, let me hit you with something that's going to make you think. The history we just talked about, it's not just in books. It's in our families, our communities, our bodies. Every time a black woman in a service job is told to hurry up or smile more, that's an echo of a past that never fully left us. And when Mary said, "I won't," she was answering that history too. So as we get ready to break down the wedding itself, I want you to hold on to this. Mary's story isn't just about one day. It's about every day that came before it and every day that's coming after. Let's keep going. Now let's set the scene again, because this moment at the wedding is where everything shifts. It's June 2025, and the Rosewood Veranda is decked out like something out of a magazine. White roses, gold-rimmed plates, a string quartet playing softly in the background. Mary Espin on her feet for hours, carrying trays of champagne, dodging guests who don't even look at her. She's used to this, the invisibility, the occasional snide comment. But today, something feels off. Maybe it's the way Anna Bennett keeps glancing at her, or the way Elizabeth Bennett, Anna's mother, whispers to her friends with a smirk. Whatever it is, Mary feels it in her gut. Trouble's coming. And then it hits. That crystal vase, it shifts just a fraction. Nobody would have noticed if Anna hadn't been looking for a reason to lash out, and lash out she does. "You're just a lowly waitress," she says loud enough for every guest to hear. This is a wedding, not a fast food joint. The crowd goes quiet. Forks stop clinking. Eyes turn to Mary, waiting for her to shrink. And then Elizabeth steps in, her voice dripping with condescension. These people should know their place. The words land like a slap, and Mary feels the weight of every stare, every judgment, every assumption about her worth. But here's the part that broke my heart when I first heard this story. Mary doesn't crumble, she doesn't run. She stands there, her hands steady, and says, "I'm sorry for the vase. I'll fix it, but I won't kneel." And in that moment, something shifts in the room. It's not just about a vase anymore, it's about dignity, about power, about who gets to decide someone's worth. And then John Matthews, the groom, steps forward. He's a tall man, biracial, raised by a black father who taught him to see the world differently. And when he hears Anna's words, when he hears Elizabeth's cruelty, he doesn't stay silent. He says, "This wedding is over." And that's where we're headed next, into the heart of this story, where one woman's courage and one man's truth collide to change everything. Now, I know you're feeling that moment, the way Mary's words landed, the way John's decision shook the room. If you're already thinking about what this means, drop a comment below. What do you think it took for Mary to stand there and say, "I whoa"? And what did it mean for John to walk away? Let's keep this conversation alive as we dive into the plot breakdown. But before we go, let me leave you with this cliffhanger. What John did next wasn't just about ending a wedding, it was about starting something bigger. And Mary, she was about to become the heart of it. Stay with me, because this is where the story starts to soar. All right, we're at the turning point now, the part where we break down what happened at that wedding, and why it's so much more than a dramatic scene. Mary Johnson's refusal to kneel and John Matthews' decision to cancel the wedding weren't just moments of personal courage. They were a seismic shift in a story that's about power, identity, and the cost of standing up. Let's dive into the plot, scene by scene, and uncover the hidden meanings that make this story hit so hard. And trust me, there's a lot here that most people miss. So let's get into it. First, let's walk through the setup. It's the day of the Bennett Matthews wedding, and Mary's in the thick of it. She's 28, a single mom who's been working at the veranda for years. She's good at her job, efficient, professional, always keeping her cool. But she's also carrying a lot. Bills piling up, a daughter who needs new school clothes, a life where every shift feels like a tightrope walk. The wedding's a big deal. The Bennetts are old Charlotte money, and Anna's been planning this day to perfection. The guest list is a who's who of the city's elite, and the pressure's on everyone, especially the staff. Now here's where it gets really interesting. The moment that vase shifts, it's such a small thing, right? Just an inch out of place. But for Anna, it's an excuse. She's already on edge, maybe because of wedding stress, maybe because she's used to getting her way. And when she sees Mary, a black woman in a service role, it's like a trigger. "You're just a lowly waitress," she says, her voice loud and sharp. And then Elizabeth, her mother, doubles down. "These people should know better." That phrase, "these people," it's not just a slip. It's a code, a signal of superiority rooted in a history we all know too well. And Mary feels it, not just as an insult, but as an attempt to erase her humanity. But wait, there's something else here that changes everything. Mary's response isn't loud or aggressive. She doesn't curse, doesn't cry. She says, "I'm sorry for the vase. I'll fix it, but I won't kneel." Those words are so simple, but they're loaded. They're a refusal to play the role Anna and Elizabeth expect, the submissive black woman, the one who vows to keep the peace. And in that moment, Mary's not just defending herself. She's challenging the entire power structure of the room. The guests, the staff, even John, they're all forced to see her, really see her for the first time. Now, let's talk about John Matthews, because his role in this story is just as critical. John is a man who's navigated two worlds his whole life. His father, James Matthews, a black man who worked his way up in the restaurant industry, taught him to be proud of his heritage, but also to play the game in rooms full of white power. John is successful, charming, and about to marry into one of Charlotte's wealthiest families. But when he hears Anna's words, when he hears Elizabeth's cruelty, something snaps. He steps forward and says, "What did you just say?" And then in front of everyone, he pulls off his ring and says, "This wedding is over." This is the part that broke my heart. John isn't just ending a wedding, he's ending a future he'd built, a life he'd planned. But he does it because he sees what Anna and Elizabeth don't, that their words weren't just an attack on Mary, but on his father, on his identity, on every black person who's ever been told to stay in their place. And when he walks away, it's not just a personal choice, it's a public statement. It's him saying, "I won't marry into a family that sees my people as less than." But here's what nobody tells you about this scene. It's not just about Mary and John. It's about the audience, the guests, the staff, the world watching. The guests are shocked, some whispering, some leaving, some shaking their heads. The staff, people like Peter, the young barista, and Susan, the pastry assistant, they're watching Mary in awe, realizing they're part of something bigger. And Mary herself, as she walks away from that table, feels the weight of every eye, but she doesn't falter. She keeps her head high, her steps steady, her apron still tied tight. That walk away, it's one of the most powerful moments in the story because it's not about defiance, it's about dignity. Now let's zoom in on a couple of key visuals because they're heavy with meaning. That crystal vase, it's not just a prop. It's a symbol of the fragile, perfect world Mary's expected to maintain, a world that's not hers, a world that can shatter her at any moment. And when it shifts, it's like her presence itself is a disruption to that perfection. Anna's white gown, too, it's not just a wedding dress. It's a symbol of purity and privilege, a costume that gives her the power to lash out without consequence. And Mary's apron, it's her armor, her uniform, but also her chain, a reminder of the labor she's bound to, the invisibility she's expected to accept. But wait, there's another layer here that's going to blow your mind. The subtext of this scene is about choice. Mary chooses not to kneel, knowing it could cost her job, her livelihood. John chooses to walk away, knowing it could cost him his status, his future. And the guests, they choose too. Some choose silence, some choose to leave, some choose to whisper their support. Every choice in this moment is a reflection of who they are, what they value, and where they stand in a world that's always asking us to pick a side. And this is where it gets really emotional for me. Because when I think about Mary standing there, refusing to kneel, I think about every black woman who's ever had to make that choice, to stand up for her dignity, even when it's risky, even when it's lonely. My auntie used to work as a hotel maid, and she told me about the time a guest threw a glass at her because the room was clean enough. She didn't yell back, she just picked up the pieces, finished her shift, and went home. But that night, she told her kids, "Don't ever let nobody make you feel small." That's Mary's story too, and it's ours. Now, before we move on, I need you to really focus on this next part. Because what happens after the wedding falls apart isn't just about Mary and John, it's about what their choices set in motion. Mary's refusal to kneel doesn't just end a wedding, it starts a movement. And John's decision to walk away doesn't just break a promise, it builds a new one. So let's keep going because the next part of this story is where it gets personal, where we see how Mary's stand connects to our community, our struggles, and our dreams. But first, drop a comment. What did you feel when Mary said, "I woe"? And what do you think John's choice meant for him? Let's keep this conversation going as we dive deeper. All right, this is where it gets personal, because Mary Johnson's story isn't just a dramatic moment at a wedding. It's a mirror showing us what's happening in our community right now. It's about the black women who keep our world turning, the disrespect they face, and the power they hold when they refuse to bow. And let me tell you, if you've ever felt the weight of being unseen, undervalued, or underestimated, you're going to feel this part of the story in your core. Let's dive into how Mary's stand connects to our lives today and why it resonates so deeply with us. First, let's talk about the reality of service work for Black women in 2025. Like I mentioned earlier, Black women are still the backbone of industries like hospitality, healthcare, and caregiving. But these jobs, they're often low wage, with long hours and little respect. I saw a study on X the other day that said Black women in service roles are 3 times more likely to report workplace harassment than their white counterparts. 3 times! And it's not just harassment. It's the constant expectation to be perfect, to smile through microaggressions, to stay quiet when you're treated like you don't matter. That's what Mary was up against at the Rosewood veranda, and it's what so many of us face every day. But here's what nobody tells you. Those moments of disrespect aren't just personal attacks. They're part of a system that's been trying to keep us small for centuries. When Anna Bennett told Mary to kneel, she wasn't just being rude, she was echoing a history that says Black women's labor is disposable, their dignity optional. And when Mary refused, she wasn't just saying no to Anna, she was saying no to her own worth, to her daughter's worth, to asterisk our asterisk worth. You know exactly what I'm talking about. How many times have you had to stand up for yourself in a job, a relationship, a classroom, knowing the world expected you to shrink? Now let's get real with this for a second. I remember working as a diner in high school, and a customer, this older white man, snapped his fingers at me like I was a dog. "Hey girl, where's my coffee?" he said. I was 17, barely making $7 an hour, and I felt my chest tighten up. But I wanted to say, "My name's Mike, and I'm not your servant." I didn't say it, I got the coffee, but I needed that job. But that moment stayed with me. And when I heard Mary's story, I realized she did what so many of us wish we could. She chose her dignity over their comfort. And that choice, it's a spark for all of us. And this is where it gets really interesting. Mary's story went viral not because of the drama, but because people saw themselves in it. The video of that editing moment, shaky and raw, spread across X, TikTok, Instagram, everywhere. Black women in service jobs started sharing their own stories under the hashtag #NotYourPlace. A server in Atlanta posted about being called girl by a customer who tipped her a penny. A hotel maid in Miami shared how about her manager told her to look too ethnic for the front desk. A nurse in Chicago said she was passed over for a promotion because she was too outspoken. These stories poured out, and suddenly, Mary wasn't alone. She was part of a chorus of voices saying, "Enough is enough." But wait, there's another layer here that's going to hit you hard. Mary's stand didn't just inspire stories, it inspired action, it did. After the wedding fell apart, John Matthews didn't just walk away and disappear. He reached out to Mary, offering her a job not as a waitress, but as a leader in his new restaurant project, a community-driven space called *Hope Rising. And Mary, who'd never seen herself as anything but a worker, she said yes. She started building something real, a place where Black staff weren't just hired, but valued, where dignity was the first thing on the menu. And that restaurant, it became a beacon for our community, a place where people came not just to eat, but to feel seen. Now let's connect this to what's happening right now. In 2025, we're seeing a wave of Black-owned businesses, especially in cities like Charlotte, Atlanta, and Detroit. These spaces, restaurants, barbershops, bookstores, they're not just about profit, they're about pride. They're places where we can walk in heads high and know we belong. And Mary's story, it's a blueprint for that movement. It shows us what happens when we refuse to let someone else define our worth, and when we take that power and build something new. I visited a Black-owned cafe in my city last week, and the owner told me, Every time I open these doors, I'm proving them wrong. That's Mary's legacy, and it's ours too. But here's the part that broke my heart and lifted me up at the same time. Mary didn't just build a restaurant, she built a movement. She started a mentorship program for young black women in service jobs, teaching them not just how to serve food, but how to stand tall. She launched a fund to help black-owned businesses get off the ground. And every time she spoke at community centers, on podcasts, even at Congress, she didn't talk about herself. She talked about us asterisk. She talked about the women who came before her, the ones still coming after. And that's why this story resonates so deeply, because it's not just about one woman's courage, it's about our collective strength. And this brings me to something personal. My mom worked as a nurse's aide for 25 years, and she always said, "Mike, you don't need a title to make a difference, you just need a heart that won't bend." When I think about Mary, I think about her. I think about all the black women in our community who keep going, keep standing, keep building, even when the world tries to break them. And I know you've got someone like that in your life, too. A mother, a sister, an auntie, a friend. Drop a comment below and tell me, who's the Mary in your life? Who's the woman who taught you to stand tall? I want to hear your stories, because this conversation is about all of us. Now, before we move on, I need you to really focus on this next part. Because Mary's story isn't just about what she did, it's about what it reveals about what we're capable of. And the truth at the heart of this narrative, it's going to change everything you thought you knew about power, about dignity, about our place in this world. So, let's keep going, because we're about to the emotional climax, the part where we uncover the deeper meaning that ties it all together. Stay with me, because this is where it gets real. All right, we're at the peak now, the part where we uncover the deeper truth behind Mary Johnson's story. This isn't just about a wedding or a waitress or a movement. It's about a profound insight into the black experience that nobody wants to talk about. It's about the power of refusing to kneel, not just for yourself, but for your community, and what that means for our future. And I know some of you watching right now have felt this truth in your bones. So let's dive into the emotional heart of this story and uncover what it really means for us. Here's the core truth that Mary's story reveals. Dignity is not given, it's chosen. When Mary refused to kneel at that wedding, she wasn't waiting for someone to validate her worth. She wasn't asking for permission to be seen. She stood tall because she knew her value, even when the world tried to tell her otherwise. And that choice, to claim her dignity in a moment of shame, it's a power that runs through every black woman who's ever faced down disrespect and kept going. It's the power of our ancestors, who survived slavery, who marched through Jim Crow, who raised families in a world that told them they were nothing. And it's the power in us today, every time we choose to stand up for ourselves and our people. But here's what nobody tells you about that power. It's not loud, it's not flashy. It's quiet, steady, unyielding, like Mary's voice when she said, "I won't." And that quiet strength, it's what changes the world. Because when Mary stood, she didn't just save herself, she gave others permission to stand too. John Matthews stood when he walked away from that wedding. The staff at the veranda stood when they started sharing their own stories. And our community stood when they turned hope rising into a movement. That's the deeper truth here. One person's courage can crack open a space for everyone else to rise. And this is where it gets really emotional for me. Because when I think about Mary's story, I think about the times I've had to choose my dignity over comfort. I remember a professor in college who told me I was too outspoken for a black student, that I needed to tone it down if I wanted to succeed. I felt that sting, that pressure to shrink. But I thought about my grandmother, who cleaned houses for white families and still came home singing hymns. And I chose to keep speaking, to keep being me. That's what Mary did, and that's what so many of us do every day. We choose our dignity, even when it's hard, even when it's lonely. But wait, there's another layer here that's going to blow your mind. Mary's story isn't just about personal courage, it's about systemic change. When she refused to kneel, she exposed the cracks in a system that thrives on black labor but denies its black dignity. The Bennett family's wealth, the veranda's luxury, the entire wedding industry, it's all built on the backs of people like Mary, people who are expected to serve and stay silent. And when she said no, she forced everyone to see that system for what it is. That's why her story went viral, why it sparked a movement, why it's still resonating today. Because it's not just about one woman, it's about all of us, fighting to dismantle a world that tells us we don't belong. And this is the part that broke my heart and gave me hope at the same time. Because Mary didn't stop at standing, she built something new. Hope Rising isn't just a restaurant. It's a vision of what our community can be, a place where black people are valued, where our stories are heard, where our dignity is non-negotiable. And that vision, it's catching fire. Across the country, black-owned businesses are rising, mentorship programs are growing, and young people are learning that they don't have to kneel to succeed. That's the hope in Mary's story, the hope that our courage today can build a better tomorrow. Now, let's talk about why this matters beyond the story itself. Because Mary's stand is a reminder that the black experience isn't just about struggle, it's about triumph. It's about the joy of claiming our space, the power of building our own tables, the love we pour into our communities. And I know some of you watching have felt this, the exhaustion of fighting, but also the fire of knowing you're part of something bigger. You felt it at family reunions, at church services, at block parties where we laugh and dance and know we're home. That's the deeper truth here. Our dignity isn't just about surviving, it's about thriving, about creating a world where our kids don't have to choose between their pride and their survival. But here's the final layer, the one that ties everything together. Mary's story shows us that change starts with us, but it doesn't end with us. When she stood, she didn't just change her life, she changed John's, the staff's, the community's. And when we stand, when we speak up at work, when we support black businesses, when we mentor the next generation, we're doing the same thing. We're cracking open a space for others to rise. And that's the revelation that changed how I see this story. Our power isn't just in our own stand, it's in the ripple effect, in the way our courage lifts everyone around us. Now, I need you to really focus on this because we're about to wrap this up with something that's going to stay with you. Mary's story isn't just a moment, it's a movement. And the question it leaves us with is this: what's your stand? What's the moment where you're going to choose your dignity, your truth, your community? Drop a comment below and tell me, what's one thing you're going to do to stand tall in your own life? I want to hear your commitment. Because this conversation isn't just about Mary, it's about all of us, building a future where no one has to kneel. And before we move to the conclusion, let me leave you with this cliffhanger. Mary's story didn't end with hope rising. There's one more moment, a final encounter, that shows us just how far her stand reached. And it's going to show you why this story is a blueprint for our future. Stay with me, because we're about to bring it all home. All right, we've been on a journey together. 75 minutes diving deep into Mary Johnson's story, from a humiliating moment at a wedding to a movement that's changing lives. And now, it's time to bring it all home. Here, that's what I want you to take away from this deep dive. Mary's refusal to kneel wasn't just a personal victory. It was a blueprint for how we claim our dignity, build our communities, and rewrite our future. This story isn't just about a waitress in Charlotte. It's about where we've been, where we are, and most importantly, where we can go. Let me tell you why this matters so much to me. This analysis took me weeks to put together, hours of research, reflection, and digging into the layers of the story. Because these connections matter, these stories matter, you asterisk matter. And when I think about Mary standing tall, about hope rising, becoming a beacon, about our community rising up, I feel a fire in my chest. Because this isn't just history, it's our present, our power, our promise. And I know you feel it too. Now let's talk about that final moment I teased, the one that shows how far Mary's stand reached. Months after Hope Rising opened, Anna Bennett's mother, Elizabeth, walked into the restaurant, not to cause trouble, but to face the truth. She handed Mary a letter, not a check, but words and apology, raw and real, admitting her shame, her silence, her failure. And Mary, she didn't gloat, she didn't reject it. She took the letter, read it, and let it be. Because her stand wasn't about tearing others down, it was about lifting us up. And that's the blueprint. Stand for your dignity, build for your people, and let the world catch up. So here's my challenge to you. Take this story and make it yours. Stand tall in your own life, at work, at home, in your community. Support Black businesses, mentor someone younger, share your own story. Because every time you choose your dignity, you're cracking open a space for someone else to rise. And that's how we build a future where no one has to kneel. Next week, I'm going even deeper with a breakdown of another Black story that's shaking things up, a film about a young activist who takes on a corrupt system and wins. After today's revelations, you definitely don't want to miss that. So, if this deep dive opened your eyes, if it made you see Mary's story and maybe yourself differently, smash that subscribe button. Drop a comment telling me, what's one way you're going to stand tall this week? I read every single comment, and I want to know which part of this story hit you the hardest. Until next time, keep digging deeper, keep finding the truth in every story, because our stories matter and so do you.